Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Mike Wilson. I'm the Executive Director of AIA East Bay, and welcome to the ninth annual AIA East Bay Home Tours. This year, our featured theme is sheltered. Of course, it's not 9 contiguous years, as the last couple of years we've had to set aside the home tours, but we're super excited for this new format. A couple of housekeeping issues first. We would like everybody to, if you can, uh, adjust the name underneath your little video window. We've got an international audience today and people from all over the country, and we just think it'd be really interesting if you could put next to your name the location from where you're actually sharing the program with us today. In the first 15 or 10 or 15 minutes, people will be filtering into the room. But we want to stick with a really strict time today, so make sure that we can get to everybody's questions and answers. So, in addition to changing your name, as we go through each one of the presenters, I'm inviting you to please put your questions into the chat. Those will be gathered up, and then, of course, at the end of the program, we will open everything up to our presenters today for question and answer. So, having said that, I'm going to hand it off now to our home tours chairperson and the person responsible for this fantastic idea of shelter. Ursula?
Thanks a lot, Mike. I really appreciate this. This is really wonderful. It's really great to see so many different people here and so much support for this event. Um, so a lot of people are joining. It's really fantastic to see that. So yeah, I'm really pleased to moderate this ninth home tour organized by the AI East Bay chapter. This one is a little different from previous years. In 2020, all of us experienced the shelter in place mandate, and our homes became the shelter from the pandemic. But we recognize, of course, that our society is diverse and all of us have different experiences of what is home. So when we were hosting the Home Tours event, we wanted to acknowledge that diversity. So we invited the architectural community to showcase how they have crafted beautiful, relevant, and innovative solutions for the housing demands across all sectors of our society. And honestly, we were really overwhelmed by the amount of submissions received. So everybody that submitted, thank you so much. From all of them, we have selected 10 projects, which we believe have great stories to share in the spirit of this movement. So I would like to, if it's okay, I'd like to share my screen and let you see what we've planned for today when we're going to be showcasing 5 of those projects from the various presenters. So let's get this underway. So just to say, today for the agenda, the overview is that I'd like to acknowledge all the people and the sponsors that made this possible. I'd like you all to prepare your calendars because I'm going to give you an overview of all the various events that we have happening in August to support this theme of shelter. And I'd like to present the presenters to you who are going to share their projects. So with a full cast here. So thank you for all our sponsors. We have gold, silver, and bronze sponsors to thank for this. Our home tours committee, there's 9 of us. We've been meeting once a week for at least 6 months in order to make this project become a reality. So thank you all. And I also want to give a shout out to Vivian Scholl of Avenue 4 Design, who was really instrumental in creating all our beautiful graphics. So today is Home Tours 1. You're going to hear from 5 different presenters. And next week, we'll be doing Home Tours 2, when we'll feature 5 different presenters who are showing projects around the country as well as in Mexico City. So on the 26th of August, Alex from our housing committee has organized a symposium which will discuss innovations in housing. So please make note of that. It's an evening event. And then one of our final features, which everyone's really excited about, is a bicycle tour. We're going to take a trip around several houses around Berkeley. All of us bring your own bicycle. We have a waiting list of 30 people, but it's going to be a fantastic way to end this event. So from that, today, we're going to hear from 5 different architectural presenters. So Kerstin Hellmann from Kerstin Hellmann Arkitektur, she's going to share her stories on designing an accessory dwelling unit in Berkeley. David Arkin, a principal with Arkin, is going to tell us about a LEED Platinum single-family residence that his firm designed in New Mexico. Anne Tourney, principal at Mithun, is going to tell us about a multi-family project that they designed, which has a strong connection to equity, and that's based in Seattle. And then Professor Seth Wachtel is going to, from the University of San Francisco, is going to share one of his really fantastic projects, which is about a tiny home village that they designed for the youth in East Oakland as part of their school program. And then we have a special feature where we're acknowledging the work of international architects. So I'm really pleased to be introducing Ole Wake from NSW Arkitektur, who's going to be telling us about a mixed-use project at the site of a former chocolate factory in Oslo, Norway. So what's there not to like about chocolate factories getting converted? But we're going to kick it off first with having a presentation from our student member. So we're going to ask Rudy if she will introduce our first speaker, Arminder. So I'm going to stop sharing. Rudy?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Ursula, and the whole team for putting together such a great event. Really interesting take on what a home tour can be. I am an architect and a professor at the University of California, Berkeley, where I teach in the architecture department. And Arminder was a great student who has recently graduated. He participated in my business partner, Kristen Seidel's architecture housing studio, where they looked at radical ideas for adding density and transforming the waterfront in Alameda. And Arminder particularly had a very innovative and beautifully thought out and resolved design. It's called Radical Privacies and the Tides. A really interesting concept, both formally and programmatically, and I'm sure all of you will be really interested to hear about it. This young man was a great student. He's, like I said, a recent graduate of Cal and is now beginning his next chapter. He's practicing at a firm. He's a junior designer, and we look forward to seeing all the great things he has in store for his future. So Arminder, take it away.
Thank you, Rudy, for that introduction. Hi, everybody. My name is Arminder, and this is my project, Radical Privacy Among the Tides. So this project essentially begins with a housing proposal that's located on the existing Alameda Shipways site near the Oakland estuary, right across Jack London Square. And its main goal is to integrate publicly accessible space and lots of abundant outdoor space with very dense housing in a new sort of architectural strategy that's been informed by the lessons of the global COVID-19 pandemic. And this project sits on the waterfront like this. And an interesting thing about this project as well is it also begins to integrate the Bay Trail, which exists around the Bay. And it's a trail system that connects parks, open spaces, interesting places, and communities near the Bay Area shoreline. And so what we'll see here is the Bay Trail actually comes into the housing proposal. And as if you were walking on the Bay Trail and approaching this project, you would see something like this sitting on the site. So this project first begins by stripping back sort of that natural coast, stripping back to the natural coastline of the bay and protecting the edge of the edge of the project with native wetland plants. And really this project begins to take shape with a very strong sense of understanding of the site's natural characteristics. And this site with its long distinct piers is actually somewhat reminiscent of the original Alameda Shipways existing site. If you were walking on one of these bays, these long piers that stretches out into the estuary, you would see something like this. And this project has the highest point, which is this northwest corner, which is the highest story is 4 stories, and the lowest building is about 2 stories, and it gradually declines in height as it gets closer to the waterfront. So this is the first ground floor plan of one of those clusters that we're looking at. And these housing clusters are residential blocks where residents live in, and each of these clusters is combining both very large open social spaces with smaller, more private sleeping and workspaces. What you will begin to see through these plans is this very distinct difference in scale between the large public spaces and the very private, compact, efficient work and sleep spaces. And these work and sleep spaces are located on the periphery of the housing cluster, whereas these more publicly accessible, more public spaces are located at the center of the cluster. And these public spaces consist of shared kitchens, dining spaces, and living rooms, living lounges. And the compact, smaller living units are consisting of 1 workspace, 1 bedroom, and 1 bathroom. And they vary. Some will have 2 bathrooms, 3 bathrooms, or 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. But at the very core, it's where you sleep, where you do your work, and then the public spaces are where you really begin to socially interact safely with other residents. And really, it's about minimizing social isolation and encouraging social interaction safely. And this is the second floor plan where we'll begin to see that shared kitchen. And so really these shared spaces, both the exterior and interior, they begin to encourage and promote the kinds of strong community connections that have become so critical to weathering because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Each of these housing clusters has a private courtyard that's only really meant for the residents that reside within these units. And these courtyards are wrapped and protected by the built housing space. And really the courtyard becomes activated by the activities of the residents, as well as really that dynamic nature of that tide. So the Oakland estuary has a tidal range of about 4 feet. And throughout the course of the day, the surface of the courtyard is stepped in such a way so that as time passes, the courtyard begins to become activated in such a way that really depends on low tide and high tide. And this picture, what we're looking at right now, is what would happen if we were there sort of in the morning looking at it at a low tide situation. And as the tide begins to rise, what really happens is that courtyard begins to flood, and it really creates these small little islands within the courtyard where residents can safely, socially distance themselves and still be very connected to the Oakland estuary. You can kayak to one of these spaces if you wanted. There's also some kayak storage on the first floor. This is a plan of belief drawing that really begins to show, again, that drastic scale difference in the small sort of compact spaces where you live, and then these large social spaces where you safely socially interact with other people. This entire housing project is constructed using entirely cross-laminated timber with some wood cladding on the interior spaces of the courtyard and metal cladding on the exterior spaces. And the sort of social spaces really have a lot of glass. That's to allow for some transparency. And the more private living spaces are more opaque, and that's where that cladding really begins to take shape. This is a photo or a rendering of what one of those interior spaces where you work would look like. And from here, you get to see into the courtyard and really experience that dynamic nature of the tide while you do your static sort of work. And really, the CLT begins to provide construction efficiency and material sustainability, which really goes back to this idea of the environmental sensitivity of the site strategy. So this here is the shared kitchen for this project. And really the CLT is really allowing for a warm interior palette, which really begins to foster a sense of belonging, protection, shelter, and aims to create a sense of home. And with that, I'll end my presentation.
Arminder, thank you so much. That's a really beautiful project. Really appreciate you sharing. So next up, we're going to go to Kerstin. And Kerstin's live at her project site with her client and her contractor. So Kerstin, you're on, and we're trying to structure everything within 15 minutes. So please do your best. Thank you so much.
Hi, welcome everybody. This is pretty exciting. We're making a big step from a very impressive project to a much smaller project. And as Ursula said, thank you, Ursula, for the introduction. I'm joined here by Ted, who is the contractor of this project, Natalie, who lives in it, and Gina, who is the owner, and her husband is taking baby right now, which might join us later, which actually was born in the process of creating this little house. Very fortunate. I have a small solo practice in Oakland. It's design focused and client oriented, and I'm really happy how it worked out that we can actually all be here together and share about it. And let me get started with the slide. It's an accessory dwelling unit. It's lovingly called Nellie's Nest in Natalie's honor. And you see the courtyard where we are located on that couch that you see. That's where we're all gathering right now. It's got beautiful landscaping. It's actually a conversion of an existing shed in the same location of the same size and envelope pretty much. And Gina and Rowan came to me to convert the shed into a house for Natalie to come live in so that she can be here with the family and have her own privacy, her own home. And there are some challenges that come with that because when you have a shed, it's most likely not conforming to the current code with regards to building code requirements, and it also it wasn't in the right location, it didn't have the right height, so we had to deal with a bunch of issues that I'll explain to you. Why am I not moving forward? So here we're getting onto the deck, and so this deck is one of the outdoor features that was part of the program that was really important. Natalie needed her own private outdoor space, separate from the courtyard that we're in. And so this deck provides both the entry to the house and a private outdoor space. And you see on the left side, right along the property line, we have these planters and a living screen. And Gina sourced that. You can see here the Cortine planters. If you ever try to build a deck next to the property line, you'll get to know that it's a difficult feat to accomplish, but with these planters, we were able to create the fire protection that's required and create a living screen to make it a private deck. And so there we go, you see the house. In order to preserve it in the location where it is, we had to preserve 50% of the structure. So we preserved the back wall on the left, that's right. It's just under 2 feet from the property line, plus the main roof. And we were allowed to raise the lower roof on the right. We actually had to raise that to be able to accommodate living space that would meet the code requirements. Another important thing that you can see on this picture, you see the clear story windows. Those were part of the original shed, and Rowan was really insistent that we would figure out a way to keep those because we raised the roof. So we ended up using the shortest windows we could get, the shallowest roof slope, and special flashing that Ted was able to accomplish so we wouldn't get water issues at those short windows. And so before we go inside, I'm going to show you a floor plan. Why it keeps not wanting me to move. So here we are on the deck. We're going to go into the double French doors, through the dining kitchen area, the living room, the bedroom, and then through the bathroom, back out onto the deck, and then we'll have a little conversation with everybody. So when you enter the building, we have the kitchen dining area right as the entry. And one thing that's really important when you have a small space and you want to have all the functions of a house in there, you need to create spaces that kind of borrow space from each other. So the kitchen and dining are distinctly separated by the stove element, that you know that that's where the kitchen ends and that the living room is beyond, but it's experienced as one space. And then here you see the kitchen in its entirety. It's actually an Ikea kitchen. We used very inexpensive materials, but high quality craftsmanship, which I'll talk a little bit more, which really helped making this all happen. And because it's a small house, the economy of scale kind of works against you. So we tackled that in that form. We have just a 24-inch range and hood and a small under-counter refrigerator that also has a freezer in it. There's no dishwasher. Microwave is in the upper cabinet. And the water heater is above the coat closet. And then you have this direct connection through the French doors to the outside. So you can eat, you can have like an outdoor dining experience. You can lounge on the couch outside. This is what we love about living in the Bay Area. So we're able to provide that for Natalie, who's when she's here visiting. And so here you get a view of the whole space. The clear story windows, it's really clear how important that is to have them flood the space with light. It makes it feel much more spacious. And you can see the dropped ceiling on the left. It really helps separate the bedroom area from the living area. And then this is the bedroom area, and you can see into the bathroom there. And I want to talk a little bit about the transition. That's another element that I think is really important to unclutter the space. So not make the architectural transitions a big deal. So this requires some good craftsmanship. You have to have a contractor that can help, think through the skin, how to create the structure below so that the skin can be as simple as this transition between the wood and the large format tile. And then we get into the bathroom, which is kind of the smallest bathroom configuration you can do. Minimal detailing. The shower is just a 2-inch drop down. We have a linear drain in the back, and there's no fittings to keep the glass in place. It's just a slot in the ceiling and then drop down onto the tile. The tile is set without any borders. There's a door to the outside. It's got obscured glass, so when it's closed, you have full privacy. It makes for great ventilation, and you can have an outdoor shower more or less if you'd like. You can you can wash your dog in there if you want. So this is a construction photo, but it shows you, I like to have the tile to be the same as the niche, and this also shows you, shows you a nice transition from the inside to the outside. Very simple. Red tape's just there because it was the construction photo. And that's a view from the outside in. There's like one element that is the recessed medicine cabinet is light, mirror, and storage all in one, and then just an IKEA vanity. And there we are back outside. And just a quick look at what it takes to keep some existing parts of the building to create the new house around it. So this is shoring the roof and the rear wall while creating the foundations below. In the front, you can see the concrete blocks was little concrete blocks that the whole shed was sitting on, which of course is not appropriate for residents. And this is the image of the framing. You can see on the right and the roof, the right wall and the roof were preserved, and the rest is new floor framing was upgraded. And there we are. This is the transformation to the finished product. And just have a few minutes to talk with everybody here. I'm so glad we're all together. So, you know, as I mentioned, communication was really important between all of us to make this happen. And the other thing was, because I was wondering, what was it that I actually had to do for Natalie? And we just had a conversation, and she's like, I just wanted an uncluttered space and lots of light. And I was like, that's what I think is the most important part. So she's like the ideal client.
Thank you.
So I think, would you want to say a little bit about that? Because I think.
Yes, my home is actually in Washington, D.C., but my children and my grandchildren are here in Oakland, and I wanted a space I could come to. I would be present with my family, but also able to escape, for lack of a better word, to privacy, a little area, and give everybody some breathing room. And that is exactly what I got. We had a great communication between my daughter-in-law, whose idea this was, Gina, and Kerstin and Ted, who made everything happen. And the key to me in having a tiny house was not to try to cram everything into it, but to live simply within it, which allowed for more space, more light, or maximum space and light that the property could have. And it's made a huge difference in everybody's life. I'm inside visiting and more space there.
It was a really great, fun process. Working with the family, Natalie and Kerstin and Gina and Rowan, talking to them, finding out what was important to them, working out details with them. The communication was terrific. The relationship grew, and I think we came out of it all very pleased with the audit. So it was very fulfilling.
We used FaceTime sometimes to resolve questions, and from DC, and that worked very well for us.
I actually had not done that before.
Yeah.
I was like, we had a meeting with Ted made his electrician available. So the electrician and we were in here pointing at things, and Natalie was directing us.
Fun.
I
think this, one of the reasons I wanted the house was my granddaughter. But the house, when I'm not here, also serves functions. I think that's important during the pandemic. Gina's father lost his house to a fire and was able to come here. I wasn't here, and they've had dinner parties there. And my son is here, has used it for his office during the pandemic when he's working from home. So it's provided a tremendous asset and shelter. Actually, this little shelter for a week.
And the project was finished in 2019, and I never photographed it. And I only photographed it, a week before the homes tour. That was kind of prompted us. That's because the day we had scheduled it to photograph, Gina called me the day before and said, we can't do it. My father is moving. So it tells you that the photographs are 2 years old. It looks like new. It's a pretty, it's been holding up really well. And I think that's of course the users are part of that, but I think it's also a sign of how it was built. It's just a good quality materials and structure.
Gina might want to say something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Before we moved to this home, we lived in what we called the compound, and it was this, all these different families living together around a central courtyard. And I think that always really informed how we thought about this that we wanted to live in. We moved to this house, there was the shed in the back, and then our main house. And then we see Natalie often, and we really love the idea of having a space where, we could have multiple families living all together in sort of this intergenerational dream. And so this has just totally brought that to life, and we've absolutely loved the impact on our family. Thank you.
Kerstin, thank you so much. It looks fantastic. And I really appreciate you all being there live in person. It was really brave and bold, so well done. Fantastic project. So Kerstin, if you can stop sharing your screen, and then we'll bring it on to the next presenter.
I thought I already did. How do I? I'm not sharing.
Okay. So David, thank you. Thank you, Kerstin. David, take it away.
Yes, well, thank you, Kerstin, for that beautiful project. And now we're going to travel further afield. I'm David Arkin with Arkin Architects, and we do a variety of projects, many of which are outside of the Bay Area. So it's a great opportunity through this virtual format to share a project located in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And were we actually there in Santa Fe, Kai and Willow would be welcoming you to the home. So let me take the opportunity to welcome you on their behalf. The Canyon Road Bridge House is about 2,600 square feet. There's also an accessory dwelling unit and a workshop laboratory. The project did achieve a LEED Platinum certification and is a net zero energy with a number of really interesting features that I'm pleased to be sharing with you here today. Every project of ours begins with a good understanding of its location and context. And in Santa Fe, for those of you who have been there, it's at 7,800 feet elevation and is the nation's smallest capital city. The project of ours is located there in the lower right-hand corner. And for those of you who have been to Santa Fe, know there's a town square at the center of the city. And Canyon Road is a art walk, a series of art galleries. Near its eastern end is the Cristo del Rey Church, which is the country's largest adobe structure. And then Upper Canyon Road, which we're located not very far from. Downtown Santa Fe is in what's known as the historic downtown district. And just above that, where our home is located, was the escarpment historic district. So still had historic review under strict guidelines. I want to mention, and it's been very bittersweet for me to revisit this project about a year after our clients moved in, the wife Julie passed away. And so it's been a special opportunity for us to share this project with you. Tuck and Julie are husband and wife epidemiologists, and Annie and I, as husband and wife architects, hit it off very well with them, and we forged a very close friendship in the creation of this project, including jaunts around the city to identify certain elements of design that would be integrated into the final project. And Tuck and their two daughters still live at the home in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Every project of ours begins with a mapping of the site and climate. So what our access to sunlight is, where storms and other features are coming from, views connecting in this case to the Los Alamos mountains and other features, but mostly downtown Santa Fe was featured. Here in this diagram, you see a very dark area. Those are places that are greater than 30% slope. And the dark dashed line is the edge of the Foothills Escarpment District, which we were also limited. There's a saying in architecture, form follows function, but let me tell you, in Santa Fe, form follows slope analysis. The red areas here exceed 30% grade and cannot be touched. The blue areas are between 20 and 30% slope, and the white areas are less than 20%. Our project could not cover more than 50% of the blue areas. After careful programming and understanding of our clients' needs, we then, as we typically do, sketched up 3 very different solutions. The first of which featured a portion of the building bridging across an arroyo. The second of which had forms that ended up in the final project. And the third of which featured the ADU, or casita as we call it, along with the garage to the west side of the arroyo and a bulk of the house to the east. So the resulting plan is somewhat gerrymandered in order to hit that magic 50% on the 0 to 20% slope and 50% on the 20 to 30% slope. We were pleased to find out that any form of coverage, including porches and other elements like that, could count as part of that coverage. A breakthrough moment in the project was when we revealed to the terrain management staff that the arroyo was in fact filled with debris from the previous owner. And that, to the great relief of the contractor, allowed them to be able to build scaffolding and whatnot for the timber frame split ring bridge that spans over that arroyo that features the 30% slopes. The other major hurdle we encountered in working in the historic district of Santa Fe was one of design review and very strict height limits. We could be no more than 24 feet tall, which would not be a problem on a flat site, but on a steeply sloping site presented itself as a challenge. But by carefully following the contours of the land and understanding that we could cantilever and bridge over some of the steeper lower sections, we were able to craft a design that met the design review standards. In the escarpment district, it was really only the view which was visible from the public way that was of concern. And here from the west end of the site, you can see that Santa Fe Pueblo style parapet roof was enforced. Our clients had first contacted us because of our work in straw bale construction, and I found myself in the unlikely and somewhat uncomfortable position of talking them out of building with straw bale, but had known that the one failure of a straw bale building I was familiar with in California had featured these same Taos Pueblo style parapet walls. We also learned from the terrain management, or from the historic review staff, that Santa Fe is actually a fantasy, and that parapet Pueblo style was imported. So instead of using straw bale, we incorporated a high mass system using insulated concrete forms, and then balanced that with dense packed cellulose insulation in the roofs and wood frame portions. As mentioned, the project did achieve a LEED Platinum certification, and this diagram outlines a number of the features. You can see we have rainwater cistern storage tanks located in the courtyard, photovoltaic as well as solar thermal energy systems, and a number of other features. If you're interested in the details of the LEED certification, you can find that on our website. And I also want to make an invitation to firms who aren't already 2030 commitment signatories to please explore that on the AIA website. Also want to take an opportunity to acknowledge members of our team, Devin Kinney within our own office, Prohl Custom Homes, and Dana Ayers, their site supervisor, Sean Kaltenbach, who did the beautiful rammed earthwork, Donna Bone, our landscape architect, Steve Onstadt, who did the LEED tabulation, and Kate Russell, whose beautiful photography I'll be sharing with you now. So were this an actual home tour and not a virtual one, you'd be allowed to wander through the house and enjoy it. And so I'm going to take you on a little tour. It'll start at the entry. We'll walk through the courtyard, into the courtyard, visit the casita or ADU briefly, across the dining room to the living room kitchen, brief peek at the girls' bedrooms, little workshop space, and then the master bedroom suite, and then Tuck's laboratory workshop down below, and we'll come back out. And while we're doing that, I'm just going to scroll the slides and share with you some of the stories of the project. So I asked Tuck, how the house has been performing from a comfort and energy perspective. And he said, the home is amazing. It was and is a perfect place to be for the pandemic. I enjoyed not traveling and watching the garden change and how the sunlight hits different areas of the house. And then, somewhat tongue-in-cheek perhaps, he went on, we are a bit disappointed that the radiant heat doesn't come on very often and make the floor warm and cozy because the passive solar is too effective and additional heat isn't needed. So now we're in the bridge, and there's actually radiant heat in that countertop along the side of the bridge. Kitchen with a bamboo counter butcher block at the center island. There's also radiant heat in the bridge's bench seating on the other side. So I asked Tuck if he were giving a tour of the home, what is the one thing he'd be certain to point out? What I love most about the house is all of the outdoor spaces. Since I mostly work from home, I moved from my morning office of the roof deck to the bedroom porch, to the courtyard, and down to the lab throughout the day. In Santa Fe, I can be outside almost all year round and can find the perfect amount of shade or sunshine throughout the day. I asked if he had a favorite story, and he brought up the one time when the rammed earth craftsman threatened to bulldoze the fireplace, the rammed earth surround around the masonry heater, after we had a reveal and discovered several voids and other inconsistencies. I actually posted a photograph of the rammed earth on my Facebook page, and dozens of friends from around the country commented on how beautiful that was. I shared those with our craftsman, and he was greatly relieved and pleased that it actually was as beautiful as it is. At the center of the home is a structure, sort of within a structure, an edicule, as Charles Moore would like to call it. And it features an interior exterior of salvaged wood boards from a local barn. Julie did print artwork. So this was her studio. You can see we brought in a lot of the colors of the landscape into the finishes throughout the project. She was also the one who was insistent that Tuck's workshop laboratory made it into the project. So here's that completed building. Lastly, I asked if there was anything else, and he added, we are always aware of the sun, the weather. We can watch and listen to the rain, which is an event in dry Santa Fe. The sun moves during the year, lighting different parts of the house. It mixes inside and outside in a beautiful way, a bit warmer in the summer, cooler in the winter, just enough to feel the seasons. Thanks.
David, thank you so much. It's a beautiful project and very contextual, and obviously a very happy client. So well done. Thank you. So I'd like to invite Anne Torney to share her project from Mithun, please. Anne, go ahead.
Mute myself. Share. There we go. There we go. Can everyone see that okay?
That's great. That's great, Anne. Thank you.
Good. Thanks so much, Ursula, and good morning, everyone. And thanks, David, for sharing that absolutely, and Annie for sharing that absolutely beautiful house. So I'm Ann Torney. I'm an architect and a partner at Mithun, and I'm really grateful for the invitation to be here today and talk about the idea of shelter. And the fact that we're not in person like David, it gives me the opportunity to think about shelter in relation to a project that we completed in the Central District, which is a neighborhood west of downtown Seattle. And like the Bay Area, like Oakland, Seattle's economic boom has not benefited everyone, and marginalized communities are being squeezed out of the neighborhoods those communities themselves built. And this is particularly evident in Seattle's Central District, which is a historically low-income neighborhood at the center of African-American life in Seattle for over 130 years. And this invites the question, is it possible to design a house, a neighborhood, and I think for all of us these days, even a nation that creates a sense of belonging for all its inhabitants? How can not only a building, but a neighborhood feel like home, with the recognition that the feeling of shelter and home is about more than design. It's about history, it's about financial and cultural equity, and provoked a question for us about how we can practice design for inclusion as architects, not just inclusion, but even anti-racism. So the project builds upon the physical as well as historical, cultural legacy of Liberty Bank, which was the first African-American owned bank in the Pacific Northwest, established in 1968. So the arc of the Central District, in 1900, Black families settled there due to redlining, which were the racist and exclusionary lending policies built into many neighborhoods around the country, including other parts of Seattle. And during this time, the Central District was characterized as hazardous, which actually prevented Black families from getting loans, excluded them from home ownership and the possibility of building intergenerational wealth. But the Central District itself was a hub for African-American and African diaspora communities who called it home. And in 1968, when if you were Black, you couldn't open a checking account or get a loan, a group of Central District residents formed the Liberty Bank, and which became a beacon for the community, not only of financial services, but represented resilience and empowerment, and stood as an example of a community solution to. But despite this resilience and strength, the neighborhood faced unprecedented displacement, and the percentage of African Americans in the CD dropped from 64% in 1990 to 28% in 2010. I'm hearing a little bit of, I'm not sure if everyone is muted. I'm hearing a little bit of rustling from someone there, which might make it hard for folks to hear. Thanks. So in 2016, an extraordinary partnership was formed between the nonprofit housing developer Community Roots Housing and 3 Central District organizations, Africatown, Bird Bar Place, and the Black Community Impact Alliance, to co-create a development and provide the opportunity for African-American community-based ownership of the building, focusing on Black equity. Bird Bar Place will have both a right of first offer and a first right of refusal to acquire the Liberty Bank after 15 years. The project partners convened an advisory board that included daughters of the original founders, longtime community members, leaders in the Central District, to advise on how to tell the story of the Liberty Bank through art, historic documents, and architecture. And their vision encompassed community partnership, economic development, affordable commercial space, and affordable housing, 115 apartments, studios, 2 and 3 bedrooms, affordable to households at 60% and below of area median income, and an intent to design the building in a way that was inspired by and reflecting the history of the community. So as Mithun was brought onto the project to think about all these elements and bring them together, our design concept and our design process incorporated these stakeholder voices via the advisory board and a cross-section of neighborhood residents. And we also consulted with Dr. Sharon Sutton, who's a professor of architecture at UW, on the principles of Afrocentric design. This input and the sense of historical neighborhood identity we then wove throughout the building design and experience. So the facade here was inspired by Afrocentric design principles, and the facade's dynamic patterns and bold colors reflect the way individual stories form a collective expression. We composed the facade using varied and playful window placement, recessed bays, and accent panels to create a residential scale and texture. At the ground floor, the building actually marks the eastern gateway to Union Street, which is the Central District's neighborhood commercial corridor, and includes a generous streetscape with planting and seating, and some of the ground floor businesses, which included the restaurant that Brown Girl Cooks, which was actually nominated for a James Beard Award in 2020. Earl's Barbershop, which is a neighborhood institution, which was displaced from a site undergoing redevelopment across the street, and Cafe Avole, a Black-owned restaurant. The residential entry for the 115 apartments is around the corner, facing 24th Street. And actually, the Seattle City Code required, this is a configuration that was discouraged by the Seattle City Code, which envisioned inner courtyards and maintaining a sort of a consistent street wall. And we made the case for a design departure to allow the courtyard to face the street, to orient it externally rather than internally, and to waive the requirement for a continuous fence or gate along the street, and in hopes that this welcoming gesture would transform the space from a resident courtyard to a sort of a neighborhood front porch. A community room and a flexible workshop flank the two sides of the courtyard and activate the space, facilitate shared events. And then there's a rooftop garden and play space that has great views out over the city. A number of biophilic design and healthy living strategies are tailored to support the health and well-being of residents. The building surpasses the Washington State Evergreen development standards by 26% and uses 54% less energy than comparable properties through an energy efficient envelope and a solar rooftop array. We also partnered with an organization called the Healthy Building Network to make Liberty Bank Building a demonstration project for a new national home-free standard. We researched and identified interior building materials beyond the standard portfolio of sustainable materials that support the health of residents. So Mithun is an integrated design firm with multidisciplinary design firm, and my landscape colleagues designed the open spaces, including this courtyard, where rainwater from the roof flows into a runnel animated with salmon sculptures before reaching a bioretention planter, creating a sensory experience of weather and nature's rhythms as residents come and go. We worked with a number of artists who placed art around the building that included elements of the original Liberty Bank that were to be preserved and celebrated, including some of the distinctive honey-colored brick of the original building, bank vaults, safety deposit box doors, and other elements. And reused brick from the original building are incorporated into the street level facade. The Liberty Bank logo is featured at the building corner. And at the lower left there, you can see some canopy art that depicts the historic red line maps of the Central District. This history portal marks a point of entry lined with bricks and safety deposit box number plates that were salvaged from the original bank building. and a mural celebrating African-American culture by Al Doggett, which announces this eastern gateway into the Central District. In this view of the lobby, the repurposed original bank vault door is highlighted in the center of the lobby as a conceptual art piece. And actually that's Al Doggett himself and Esther Irvin, two of the contributing artists. On the ground level is a community room featuring a warming kitchen, and it has views out onto the courtyard, and it's available for resident meetings, social gatherings, hosting events, and the art on the wall features profiles of the founders of the original Liberty Bank. On the opposite side of the courtyard is a multi-purpose workshop for bike repair, school projects, furniture assembly, or other hands-on projects that might not be spaced for within the apartments. And it features a mural on its back wall, which is visible along 24th Street. So the aspiration, and actually, so this is an overhead shot of the ribbon cutting on opening day, which was a huge neighborhood celebration. And here you can see the front porch idea at work, how for large events, it can become not only just an open space for the residents, but a public space. And the hope is that this development serves as a model for community-led development in Seattle and beyond, from its construction to its design, the way it's used, and the ownership of the building. The aspiration is that the building sets a new standard for what community-led development and the idea of shelter and home. And I just want to end on a quote from a neighborhood resident, which I think speaks to the idea of the broader idea of shelter, and something that I hope our practice and profession as architects can aspire to. Thank you.
That's a really impressive project. It's complex, but I mean, great to see such fantastic community-led involvement. Really impressive. Thank you for that. So we'll answer questions at the end. We'll do Q&A at the end. So right now we'll just move on to introducing Professor Seth Wachtel, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. I'm Seth Wachtel. I direct the architecture program at the University of San Francisco and teach through real projects for underserved communities, both locally and internationally. It's an honor to be here to join in presenting the Youth Spirit Artworks Tiny House Empowerment Village. The realization of this village is a dream come true for the youth who conceived of the idea, and the project has been one of the most rewarding of my time in the architecture fields. It has also become a novel prototype for testing ideas and is serving as a guide to future housing projects. Trying to advance it here. We've got 15 minutes, but years of history, planning, and political process behind the final completed project that we're sharing today. And this all started as a gem of an idea from homeless youth, from Youth Spirit Artworks, a Berkeley-based nonprofit where participant youth conceived of the idea and were involved in every step, seeing the project to completion. The youth are between 18 to 25 years of age, who found themselves in the street, many of them aging out of foster care, and others facing other challenges. They conceived of this project as their primary need of finding housing and have a goal of 100 homes for 100 youth. It was a multi-year project for at least 4 years of a road to get to the final location. And it was a commitment of the youth and YSA director, Sally Hindman, their board, and the primary contractor, Rolf Bell, who kept pushing in the belief that this idea was valuable and important enough to see through to completion. And here's the ribbon cutting. We lost the site in Berkeley, the original site 4 years ago due to NIMBY pushback. And then we left a second site next to an 8-lane freeway to this final site adjacent to the Oakland Coliseum that was offered and agreed to by the City of Oakland on a renewable lease. The property was a literal blank slate, an acre of land completely covered by a solid concrete floor slab of a former warehouse. There was no exposed soil, no trees, no nearby structures, and a very open, windy site. Daylighting the soil was not allowed due to fear of what might lay beneath. So the wind, sun exposure, and the concrete slab became the key drivers during the design process, which began in late January 2020. This was the 5th team over 3 years from USF Arkitektur working with me, with YSA Youth and YSA Leadership on the project. And every design iteration that came before informed the next as we move through the design process. How do you create a generous, lively, and comfortable village setting in a windblown, sun-exposed concrete environment? How is community space formed that is public, but also allows varying levels of privacy? There was a limit of 28 resident youth set by the nonprofit, as this was the maximum they felt was doable from a management standpoint. And this low density on an acre of land made us choose to create 4 separate smaller courtyards surrounded by 7 tiny homes each. The main entrance from Hegenberger leads to the main pathway through the center of the village, with security and bike parking at the front. To soften the concrete environment, many dozens of raised beds lead to 2 30-foot diameter community yurts, one for kitchen and dining, and the other for hangout space and laundry. Behind the community yurts and between the housing courtyards, we located prefabricated bathroom trailers, each with 3 full baths, including 2 ADA restrooms. At the end of the main pathway, there's an intake counseling space and a health clinic run by volunteer nurses and doctors. Wanting to discourage smoking, but knowing reality, we designated the farthest corner of the site for this use beyond the 20-foot fire lane wrapping the property. Here's the 3D conceptual design that was presented in mid-May 2020 to the community. The colorful homes were already under construction elsewhere, with vibrant visual color being planned for each individual dwelling space, as well as for the ground surfaces of the village. Construction began 2 weeks later in early June, and the project was ready for the first residents just 9 months later. The speed with which the project got built was extremely fast, and this was due to a number of factors. Tiny homes were already well under construction at multiple sites in Oakland, Alameda, Berkeley, and elsewhere. There was a deep commitment from multiple professionals involved, from architects to contractors to tradespeople, and the endless volunteer hours from well over 1,000 volunteers, individuals and families, dozens of faith groups, corporate volunteers, and union trade professionals. It was a party every weekend, and the village became a reality. This is the approach from Hegenberger Road toward the entrance to the village. The lemon tree planters lead to the entry with a plate steel gateway sign. Here's a view across some of the raised bed planters to the central zone of the village, with the community yurt on the left and some of the tiny homes forming the northeast courtyard. And a broader view of the village with a seating area and the main walkway, with the Coliseum and A's Stadium as the backdrop to the village. Some of the most impactful and delightful aspects of the village is the artwork, the 100+ murals, fence poems, and the 1 acre ground mural. Here are volunteers painting the 8-foot wood plank fence where hundreds of youth and adults created their own poems, prayers, and sayings on every one of the 1,000 fence boards that make up the 900 feet of fence that surrounds the village. Many children from after school and summer programs joined in the painting of the raised bed planters at the front entrance and in the interior of the village, as well as the fence boards. And this is the bright and colorful presentation that you get when approaching the village from the main street, Hegenberger Road. Graffiti artists were also offered large swaths of fence to do their wonderful art with the help from youth. And hundreds of individuals continue to put signs of love, compassion, and camaraderie on every fence board circling the 1 acre village. This is one of what will be 2 trellises for outdoor dining adjoining the kitchen that will help break the heat of the sun. In the foreground, you can see some of the ground mural that we will see more of later. This is one of 2 prefabricated bathroom trailers, each with 2 regular and 1 ADA restroom with mechanical lift. And another view across some raised beds where there are now mature vegetables, flowers, and herbs. And the solar power stations are backup electricity from when PG&E hadn't completed their hookups. We are now looking at the possibility of demonstrating being able to take the village off grid. And that's a work in progress. Here, volunteers are erecting the roof structure of one of the 30-foot diameter yurts, and a resident preparing a meal inside the completed community kitchen. And another view of the dining tables and chairs and some residents. And a view inside the 30-foot diameter community lounge and laundry facility. There's an early photo of the raised beds being arranged to define the pathways and connections to each yurt and courtyard. And volunteers shoveling topsoil and compost to fill the raised beds. And a view of the raised beds beginning to form the village center and help the physical space start to come into being. Bike sheds were necessary as each resident has access to a bike, and these are now locked up in this location toward the front of the village. Bike sheds were necessary. One of the benefits of the property location is that it's close to the Coliseum BART station and on a major bus line, but it's still distant from workspaces and other locations the youth might want to travel. So bicycles have become an important form of transportation. Here's one of the last tiny homes being built on the village site. Volunteers from various organizations came and adopted a single tiny home to build. Most were built off-site, while other teams came to the village to build them in place. You can see some of the infrastructure running in front of the tiny homes. These utilities are run above ground and are now hidden by wooden walkways with steps up to each tiny home, forming the edges of the courtyards. Hiding them under the walkways helped us avoid many hundreds of feet of saw cutting to underground the utilities beneath the concrete slab. Here's a view from the site we used for the staging of many of the tiny home builds on Brush Street off San Pablo Avenue near the 580 freeway. You can see hundreds of volunteers that day, a couple dozen tiny homes under construction. It was a fantastic community build. All of these tiny homes were built to current residential building and fire code, but they're on wheels to allow easy movement. And this also means an easier Department of Motor Vehicles permit rather than a building permit. A couple of volunteers doing finish painting and caulking. This is a tiny home being built at the YSA main office in their yard in Berkeley near the Ashby BART station. Each tiny home has a skylight, operable windows, and both an entry and emergency exit door, and a Murphy bed. Here is a volunteer doing some chop saw work. There was a robust training program led by the lead contractor, Rolf Bell, with many years of experience with Habitat for Humanity, leading crews. So lead carpenters and other tradespeople were trained to guide both skilled and unskilled volunteers, making the process pleasant, fun, and rewarding. Here are 4 tiny homes getting an ADA ramp and entry platform. 4 of the tiny homes have ADA access with the possibility of adding 3 more to make it 7 out of the 28 being compliant. 9 tiny homes here having just gotten their base color in anticipation of far more elaborate murals to come. And a photo of 2 mural painters. Many of the artists were from Youth Spirit Artworks, the nonprofit, and their mentor training program, as many professional muralists also became involved to contribute their artistry. There are over 100 murals in the village, and that's not counting the many hundreds of fence boards that we saw earlier. And here are some examples of the beautiful work. And the art alone is worth a visit to the site. All different styles and themes and emotions and interests, expression of the residents, the range of the population living and working in this place creates a vibrant atmosphere that is reinforced and even amplified by the artwork. It is a reflection of the celebration of a diverse population seeking growth, acceptance, and opportunity in the world. More examples of the exquisite detail and artistry, some hand painted, some with spray cans, all of them incredible work. Some modern and fanciful, some about heritage, others about fun, and others about art and music. All of them side by side, creating courtyards of community, becoming the village we see today. And even in the rain, the vibrancy comes through under a cloudy sky. And more examples of the individual dwelling spaces that each resident moved into. And finally, the finishing touch to fully spark life in the village was the ground mural. It fills an acre of concrete slab with colorful walkways of flowers, animals, and birds as you make your way through the village and into the community spaces and individual dwellings. This is the final conceptual drawing of the mural overlaid on the master plan. Volunteers painting one of the major murals. And here's a drone shot from above the village, giving a sense of where the mural was heading as a final conception. So that's the Youth Spirit Artworks Tiny House Empowerment Village, a vibrant place of color and community. And we continue to add important features to the village. Here's the, we're completing the intake office and health clinic, the interior of the clinic, and a self-supporting straw bale building that will serve as an art display and storage space where youth can sell their art. Another view of the building under construction. And finally, a shot of the opening ceremony with speeches by the mayors of Oakland and Berkeley and council members, and the ribbon cutting for a village that now provides a happy setting for young people who are now housed with a comfortable place to sleep, with community spaces to hang out with friends, where they can learn life skills and learn to grow into their lives. Learning from the successes and challenges along the way of this multi-year project, the way in which the tiny homes were built, the materials used, the labor involved, and the infrastructure required that was half the cost of the project, we've learned some lessons and are now involved in designing future projects where we are trying new approaches. We are looking at range of ways of creating higher density, from the 3,000 empty lots in Oakland that could temporarily house 8 or 9 individuals each, to much larger housing projects for college students or self-organized groups for homeless encampments. We're exploring prefabricated factory-built housing types as a way to scale rapidly on 1- and 2-story opportunities in Oakland, Berkeley, Hayward, and other places. So that's where we conclude for now. thank you for the opportunity to share the project. We're happy to answer questions and look forward to giving tours and providing volunteer opportunities.
Seth, that's really wonderful. I mean, having been there several times, every time I go, it keeps getting better and better and better. And it's such an optimistic place to be. So I applaud all of those 1,000 volunteers in your group that have made this happen. So well done.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to our final presenter. Ole is going to be sharing his presentation to us from Oslo, Norway. Ole?
Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, all good.
Yeah, I'm sitting on the other side of the world, Oslo, Norway. Here is now almost 8:30 in the evening, and it's a great pleasure to be with you in the morning times on the West Coast. I'm going to show an example of housing in an urban situation, a whole city block, consisting of new and old buildings. But before I do that, I will just tell you a bit about our firm, since we're such a long way away. Is that okay, Ursula? Yeah. Okay, then I'll share this screen. Something got stuck. Just a minute. You almost got having under control. There you are. Okay, I'm going to show you, first of all, a little bit, and we're going to go through, this is an old chocolate factory, turned into housing and lots of other uses on the ground floor. And there are just a few headings I'll do one by one. But before I do that, I will tell you a bit about our firm. Now, I'm the W and the NSW, and we started this firm a few years ago. And first I'll tell you who we are. Now, we are an international community, about 70 employees, 15 nationalities, and what's probably more important, that several Norwegians are trained abroad. Some their full training in architecture abroad, and some part of it. And I myself, I'm privileged to have got my master's degree from an American university. Now, where are we? Here we are in Norway. We are in the capital. Our head office is in the capital of Oslo. Then we have an office in the inland town of Hamar. And north of the Arctic Circle, we got a lovely little office in the coastal town of Svolvær in the Lofoten Islands. Now, what do? We deliver full services within, maybe I should just add before I give you the list, and that is in Norway, we can actually practice everything from interior design to landscape architecture planning without any professional boundaries. So we offer services in architecture, planning, in urban design, interior design. And this covers projects both large and small. We do refurbishment and transformation. And the project you see on the right, I couldn't resist putting it on the screen because that is a lift bringing you up to a high level location in the town of Arendal. And this was open for the public just a week ago, last Friday. Now, where do we work? We do most of our work in Norway, obviously, that's where we are based. But we also worked in all these countries you see here, England, Estonia, Finland, Germany, etc., and even down to Wales. But as I say, but so far not in the US. What you see on this picture, you see a village in Italy, and where we designed a new house in the medieval village. And the idea was to make it both look a piece of contemporary architecture, but also fitting into the medieval structure. Now, then we move on to the actual chocolate factory. The chocolate factory, as I said, consists of a whole city block. There were existing buildings and some had been demolished and some gap sites were already there. And I'm going to take you through 4 subheadings: a shelter, what do we mean by that? Transformation, a diverse city block, and apartments vary in size. Now, this is actually an environment for people of different ages, different social backgrounds, but all prefer to live in a very urban situation. So first on to shelter. Our definition in terms of this tour is that shelter is more than a protected and safe living environment. It also refers to social contact with family and friends. And in modern housing terms, it should also make references to a better quality living environment. Now, this was very important for the client, for us, when we started the project. This former chocolate factory has been transformed to new and varied uses. As I said, the buildings from different periods have been refurbished, and new and contemporary architecture has been introduced. A key principle of transformation has been to retain a varied architectural mix. In other words, this is not buildings of the same period of one kind, but it had already a great mix, which was easy to add to, and was a very interesting challenge to how to merge new with old. Well, there were 3 buildings, rather large buildings, have been renovated, and we have designed 6 new ones within the block. And the buildings surround a green and protected courtyard for the children to play and adults to stay in, but also a common roof terrace accessible to all residents. So you get fantastic views over the city. Now, what does it result in? It gives diversity in building age, building forms, architectural expressions, and not the least materials, as we see in this picture, but all within the same grand scale. The great diversity in building use also includes, in fact, very interestingly, mainly on the ground floor, first floor, theater, dance school, design office, cookery, teaching, but all dominated by housing. And this is for people who live there, but also for the surrounding neighborhood. And the only offer that was here before we started was, in fact, a theater and a dance school, and they are still there in an important corner of the block. Well, the departments vary in size. There are single-person apartments, there are family homes, and there are maisonettes, or duplexes, some call it, i.e. more than 1 story in a 2-story apartments within the block. And interestingly enough, a number of people who moved in our families who don't prefer to have their own motor car. There can be a shared system, or because the public transport system is so good that car parking has not been the most important issue. Now, then we are moving on to the next chapter, and that is the urban context. This is an interesting part of the city, which was formed, the master planning was from the late 1800s, where you got new buildings and old buildings, and you have some nice parks as well. In order to, for those of you who are a bit uncertain exactly where Norway is, you can see, this is a map of the world. Now, California, East Bay is over here. Now, here we're moving over to Europe, and here you got France, you got Germany, Britain, and here is Norway. And I'll show you a bit closer where we are. Here's Oslo in the southern part of the country, the capital. And here moving into the city. We'll obviously not go into detail, but just to show that the chocolate factory is within a great, well, good walking distance from the very city center, but it is within walking distance. This is the city environment, what the street look like. Normally 2 or 3 story buildings, but in our area where the chocolate factory was, they were taller. And here is some parkland very close to the site. So the chocolate factory, as I explained, covers a complete city block. And here you see it in red. And I show you a video taken, you see that the block, how it fits into the streetscape. It's not a very long video, but gives you some impression of the new and old and how it fits in relation to the surroundings, in relation to the courtyard, etc. And here you can see the Oslo fjord and what just about, and the mountains in the distance. The landscape courtyard was created to be an interesting and inviting space for all the residents, but also for a kindergarten. We can use it during the appropriate hours, and for the kids to play in the afternoon and evening. Then we move into the next one, infill, onfill, and new build. This photograph gives an example of, this is an existing building old building, and we built on top of it. In fact, the only part which was left before we started was in fact the front facade in bricks. This is a new part, this is what we call an onfill. Now the infill is obviously between the two buildings, and this is a beautiful building from the 1930s, which has also been converted, and an onfill approach to that one as well. Here you see the whole block. Now here she started with a theater and a dance studio I mentioned, which was there before we started, and that one we haven't touched. Here is an example of new build. Opening up quite a lot in the north, so you can actually northern part of the site, so you get without sunlight into this building. Here is an example of onfill, then you got infill, onfill again, and two infills. This is the whole block. Here you see some more examples of infill. Now, this is obviously fitting in between the two. And also here, there's existing and another example of infill. And here, what we call an onfill. And here, interestingly enough, this is the drawing we did before we started, and this is the end result. So it looks a bit like it was planned. And here you see the onfill bit on top of this one, the beautiful building from the 1930s. And here an example of new build. In fact, these are maisonettes, duplexes, both at the top and the bottom, with very open terraces, facing the courtyard, facing the sun. And here's a guy in his kitchen. And here is another example of like French windows, example where you couldn't have any proper balconies, but it seemed to work, hopefully. Now we're moving on to the next chapter. Old and new. And here you see that this is obviously old and new, and they all then attempt to merge together in unit. And here, this is what the building that was left before we started the old one. And here you see an example of how they all fit together, three buildings. And here you see an example of how we found this existing beautiful timber work. And here an example what we built on top of it. Now, I think I'm soon getting close to my 10-minute presentation. So here we'll now give you first the first floor activities, activated streets. I mean, you know, the ground floor is so important that we not just have a housing project, but a very diverse situation. And this is the existing theater. This has been coupled with a number of other offerings. Like here you see great activities, diversity, theater, dance, music, culinary school, and first floor creativity. In other words, apartments and first floor activities result in a social mix. So social mix was a very important point at the outset of the project, not just provide a shelter, but more than a physical shelter. Here, the diversity, here in fact, we're in the culinary school, the cooking school, and these people helped create their own food. Here is the teaching chef, and they're sitting within the old and the new environment. Then we have the Black Box Theatre. Now this is now hosting international Norwegian contemporary performing arts programs, as it says. And here you have the Dance and Urban Sound Studio. Dance classes, workshops, courses, seminars being offered to obviously the residents of the block, but also people in Oslo. And here the Culinary School has got a lot of attention. Now this means a cookery course, it means in Norwegian, and with interesting environment. And here you can see that people are getting very excited about what they're learning. And the first floor, creativity, we call it. Here, straight in from the street, here's a beautiful design office. Graphic designers are here. This is where your entrance space, and here you're sitting. And when they sit here, they're looking straight onto the street, and people can see them from the outside, and nothing to hide. That they are also, although they're not actively moving in and out, they are very much adding to the quality of the environment. And then finally, we're looking at the architectural diversity. Architectural diversity you see maybe clearly on this example, but also here I just added some of the elevations, street elevation, you can see them, the complexity of diversity, the new and old, and how it all is meant to fit together. Not all exactly the same height, like this one, we said now this one should be allowed to to protrude a bit, and this one should come a bit high, but generally they're roughly the same scale. But we felt that this was possible to do, and we were looking for this kind of diversity. And finally, now we couldn't help thinking about what is it? Is it a chocolate block? No, it's not exactly a chocolate block, but it's the chocolate factory in a block. We couldn't resist using that term. But this is, although it's quite dense, it seemed to work, and people are very happy living there, and we keep getting nice reports. So to put it bluntly, we are very happy to be in the architects. And if you want to know more about it, in here we have given some more details. Thank you very much.
Oh, that was really wonderful. I can just imagine the aroma on the project site when you were working there.
Yeah. Sorry, can you repeat that?
Well, the aroma of what would have been the chocolate factory must have been
chocolate
really
aroma, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this was, in fact, we found some old chocolate machinery and also packing machines in the basement. So it has added to the, if you like, the inspiration of the project anyway.
It's very contemporary, modern solutions. So mixing old and new together, it's really amazing. Thank you. So we'll bring all the presenters together. Ola, you can stop sharing. And we've obviously run over time a little bit, but if people don't mind, we'll just take one or two questions. We gathered a few that were in the chat, and maybe I'd like to just ask Anne, a question came in about how many people actually live in the Liberty Bank building, and how do you select the residents for the building?
So it's 115 apartments, and it's a mix of studios and ones and twos and threes. So I don't know actually the total number of residents, but in affordable housing, typically a 3-bedroom can be occupied by up to 7 folks. So it's often quite densely occupied. So I'm guessing it's somewhere, over 300 folks who live in the building. The selection is, of course, conducted by the developer. And affordable housing here and in Seattle, it's under such incredible demands. Usually there's 10 times, they do a lottery. They usually have 10 times the number of applicants than there are apartments. So, and then with the lottery, someone's name is picked out of a hat. You need to qualify in terms of income. The residents in the building all need to be making 60% of area median income or below. In Seattle, I think the area median is 110,000 for a family of 4. And they have different tranches, 60% and below, 40%, 20%. And in this particular project, they were able to ensure that the majority of the apartments went to folks who were Central District residents, which was a really important factor.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So really people that lived in the community were the ones that were probably getting first priority.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, great. So here's a nice easy question for Kerstin. Someone wanted to know what the exterior dimensions were of your ADU. Sure, you know that like that.
I know it's a 414 square foot building. Exterior dimensions. I have to look it up. Sorry.
No problem. Well, the plans you showed on the presentation, so they'll be available for viewing whenever we do the recording. And Arminder, we have a question for you. And I think the question was, how would you envisage how the tidal courtyards would deal with seaweed and ocean growth?
Yeah, it's a pretty good question. That's something I didn't think about too much, but initially the way that I was doing the project was that the courtyard was stepped in such a way that it would create little kind of like tide pools when you go to the beaches and stuff where you get little tide pools. And I was imagining that because of the stepping, when the water level would drop, there would be little pockets of water that would stay. And I imagined that the growth and the seaweed and all that would be controlled and be limited to those little pockets. And there probably had to be some cleaning that had to be done around the year.
And it's also very indicative of the natural environment,
Right.
So you'll see all the change in the effects of freshwater systems happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Seth, I know a lot of people are really interested in your project. It's incredible. And I think Sally has given people links to how they can volunteer. I think one of the questions was all about the fundraising. And it sounds like Sally is saying it's all private donations, individual donors and corporations, but no doubt it's an ongoing effort because the aspirations for 100 homes for 100 youth, it's really noble and it'd be really great to help you achieve that. So.
Yes, and we're now looking at, this project was low density and the need is so much greater than what we could provide, 28 homes. It's really in the thousands and tens of thousands if you look countrywide, or millions even. So it has to be scaled. And we're now looking at factory built prefabricated systems that also provide volunteer opportunities to finish them out for skills training and social volunteerism as a way of addressing the rapidity that's necessary and also the density that's possible.
Yeah, amazing project. I mean, yes, it's been going on a long time. It's just great to see it finally come into fruition. Hopefully it just keeps getting better and better. So here's a general question for the panelists and whoever wants to volunteer and step in. That would be great to hear. Of course, it's all to do with the pandemic. So the query is, has the experience of the pandemic so far led you to any new conclusions or insight into how you design shelter? What has changed or what has stayed the same for you and your clients? So we've got a few minutes left. So if anybody would like to rise to that challenge, that's a nice question to ponder.
I'll jump in and note that for a number of our residential clients, they are definitely aware that working from home is becoming more of a reality for a number of people. So creating flexible spaces, an office that can double as a guest bedroom, for example, or accessory buildings that can be utilized for meetings. One client has meetings in their van. And that's always, available space. And I think people are also interested in energy systems, photovoltaic systems that provide backup power at their homes. I'll also quickly note that we have been able to host a number of straw bale raisings through the pandemic. They're outdoors, you're distanced, you're typically wearing masks and gloves anyways, and we held them for a fire rebuild for the Youth Spirit Artworks. We participated in that straw bale stack, and next week we'll be building some farm worker housing. So the pandemic has, as we all know, has not stopped construction.
Yeah. Yeah, it remains a challenge. I mean, Ole, in Norway, are you finding something similar that the professional community there is modifying their practices as to how they would be designing?
No, you find the same, obviously, but nothing seems to be concluded. A lot of even state clients, government clients, they are now looking into the need for, say, office provision. Do people need as much space in the office? So if they work like 2-3 days at home, housing is becoming more important because people spend more time at home. But I think our office experience is quite interesting. Maybe I think we share with most architects is that most of our colleagues work from home during this period. Very few were in the office. They were not able to come to the office. But this is actually a greater challenge for architects than most other professions. A lawyer can work at home. It's not difficult, but the architects, we normally do our work in groups. This is kind of collaboration exercise. And it's very difficult to collaborate just on the screen. It's much easier if you can sit there, come a snide remark, and just touch a little bit your pen, the paper, and together, and you come up with great ideas. So we are very, very happy that almost everybody's back again in the office.
That's great. That's impressive. Thank you for that. So just one last question for Kerstin, if you don't mind, are you able to share approximate costs of an ADU?
Approximate cost? Should I do that? I would say that if you can do it for 200,000, it depends on the size. Then you are really, really. I mean, that's probably not really possible. You should probably assume 300. It depends on the size. It depends on utilities. It depends on so many different factors, but it's, as I said, economy of scale is kind of against you. And, you know, it's a little bit easier because of the regulations. There are some, you know, they're making it possible, but you have a lot of hurdles still to overcome, cost being one of them.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about the size. So we think it's 13 feet deep. The bathroom is 6 by 6. So, and then overall 13 feet by whatever that ends up being in 400 square feet.
Okay, well, you packed a lot in a very small space. So I'm going to wrap it up. I just want to thank you all. It was a fantastic pilot event. I really appreciate all of you contributing, and thank you so much for sharing your stories about your different shelter design portfolio. It's really appreciated. So hopefully we'll see you all next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.